Welcome back to the Button Tree Book Club. This week we are discussing two stories based on my favorite Disney movie, based on my favorite fairy tale, and it is also Valentine weekend, so it is a bit of a romance. We are reading The Beast Within by Serena Valentino. Well, I guess we're reviewing The Beast Within by Serena Valentino, and also As Old as Time by Liz Braswell from the Twisted Tales series. Both of these books were phenomenal. Are they my favorite things I've ever read? No, I give them between 3 and 4 stars, because there are things that I'm like, meh to. But what I love about the story of Beauty and the Beast, and what did come through in these books, is the original concept of Beauty and the Beast about inner beauty, not outer beauty. Because we live in a world that's so obsessed with outer beauty, and what's really important is inner beauty. Kindness, generosity, honesty, just being a good person on the inside. And while external beauty is nice, internal beauty is far more important in the long run. Alright, so let's talk about these two books. They have some very few things in common, but I feel like that's the place to start, because there's far more differences than similarities. And I'm gonna say it now, if you don't like spoilers, stop watching here, because there's no good way to talk about the similarities, or the differences really, without spoiling major plot points and things of these books. So if you don't like spoilers, stop now. Okay, if you're still watching, that means you're either fine with spoilers or you read the books, which you really should. They're really good. Alright, I'm gonna start with similarities. Okay, so obviously you have your two main characters. You have Belle and the Beast. I mean, you kind of have to have that. And you still have... Oh, you also have Gaston. He plays very different roles in both books, but there is still a Gaston. I guess you can't really have that story without Gaston. I think that's about it. I mean, I guess Belle's father is still in both of them, but he's a very minor character. I don't think he's even named in Beast Within. Like, of course he's there. Like, he's the reason Belle goes to the castle. But again, he's such a tiny component of the story. So I guess those are the most in common. Maybe like some of the people in the castle, but again, Beast Within, it's not named as much as it is in As Old as Time. But again, they're in both. There's a prince who gets cursed and turned into a beast. That's still the same. I mean, you really wouldn't have the story if that didn't happen. Let's see. Belle goes to the castle to rescue her father, and then ends up staying there. And then you have the magical rose. Beautiful magical rose. It's in both. And then Beast and Belle obviously are probably gonna most likely romantically end up together. Even though, again, that's not really fully stated in some ways, but like it's implied that in both cases they end up together. I mean, that's the story. Alright, I'm gonna start with The Beast Within, because there's a lot of differences, so I'm gonna go through that now. But I'm gonna start with this one. For one thing, this book is a lot shorter. I think this book is maybe 210 pages. And that's not to say it makes it better or worse. Like, a book can be 1,000 pages and be amazing. It can also be 100 pages and still be amazing. This one is just shorter, but it's also part of a longer series, which is why it doesn't need to be as long. But I want to talk about this cover. This cover is really cool. I'm going to show you. So that's the main cover, and then if you take off that cover, you have this. It's super cool. All of the villains books are like this, where you have the two side, like if there's more than like one side to a villain. It's like that with all of them. It's super cool. Okay, now that I'm done geeking about the cover. So The Beast Within is book 2. So with this series, the villain series, it's the idea that all of these big fairy tale stories are happening in the same world. All the villains know each other. The Beast is not exactly a villain. He's not a good guy. This is one of those big discussion points that a lot of people bring up. Is the Beast a villain? Is he? I guess you could say he is more of an antagonist character. He's not a protagonist. The protagonist is clearly Belle. But is he exactly an antagonist? I don't know. Because he goes through a major change, and there's a lot of... I don't know. I'd love to know your opinions. Is the Beast a villain? Is he a antagonist? I want to know. Tell me in the comments what you think. I don't have a fixed opinion. Now, according to this, you would think, oh yeah, he's the villain. He's just a really big jerk. But I think that's the idea of the story. He's selfish and self-absorbed. He's spoiled. He's mean. And he gets cursed because of it. So in this one, he gets cursed by a girl that he was actually engaged to. That's the word. Engaged. He is engaged, and there's a lot of external characters. So the idea with the villain series is the real stories are happening. So the story of Beauty and the Beast happens pretty much exactly the same as we know it. But we see behind the scenes. We see some of the things that happen before, some things that happen after, some things that are happening during their story, like behind the, like, who's pulling the strings. It's really cool. I really like this series so far. I've read this one and I've read the next one, and both of them are very interesting. They are a little dark, but they read for a younger audience, I think. They read maybe upper elementary, middle school, maybe high school, or people that just really love Disney, which is me. I love Disney. But what's really cool is, like, the villains all know each other. The villains are friends, well, kind of. Can villains actually be friends, or are they just kind of like, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, or whatever however that saying goes? I don't know. But there's a group of sisters that are kind of pulling all these strings behind the scene. And the Beast gets engaged to one of them, and then he finds out that, like, it's that whole, he sees that she's not actually this big, rich, fancy princess that he thought she was, and so he breaks off the engagement with her, and of course then she curses him. Just like the original. But then he apparently, between that and Belle, there is an actual princess that he gets engaged to. He's a bit of he just kind of bounces from girl to girl because he wants someone pretty and that makes him feel all important. But he learns that that's not what's important. Just having someone that's pretty is not important. You need someone who is also good on the inside. So then there's the curse, of course, like, he has to love and earn the love in return. And the princess he gets engaged to after he's been cursed. Because that's the interesting thing about this the curse in this one, is it's not a sudden, he goes from prince to beast like this. It's, he starts to change over time. He becomes more and more beastly the more spoiled and terrible he acts, which is actually really cool. Mind blown moment of this book, the Beast is best friends with Gaston. Well, before he was a beast, the prince is friends with Gaston. And the second I read that, I went, oh boy, I'm gonna hate the prince even more than if he likes Gaston, then clearly they're... Because apparently they've known each other since they were children. That's part of the story. We get a lot of backstory of how the prince grew up, how his best friend was Gaston, how, like, they went on hunts together, they were friends. Gaston's family, like, worked in the palace, and how at the time, like, for Gaston, status didn't matter, but he had looks. We all know Gaston is kind of the thing. He's like the handsomest man in town. I don't know. I think for a moment that deterred me because I was like, oh boy, am I going to see him as unredeemable at that point? Is the Beast really redeemable if he's best friends with the likes of Gaston? He does. One thing I will say for sure about Beast Within, the actual story of Beauty and the Beast is a very, very small fraction of the book. It might be like it's dotted throughout, I guess, sort of, but it's maybe a third of the book is the actual story that we know. A lot of it is more like what's going on behind the scenes, these sisters that cursed him and how they're kind of playing behind the scenes to try to make sure he stays cursed. And of course, the curse breaks, and Belle and Beast, now Prince, are together. Happily ever after, at least for this story. Until you get to the next one where there's a new villain and we learn a new story. But that's The Beast Within. It's really good. I think you have to be prepared to see a lot of repetition because they're trying to get you to remember the names and the important details and all of that. So there is a bit of repetition that does get a bit tedious, I will say that. Between the two of them, I liked Beast Within less. I give it more of a 3.5. But as Old as Time, I'd probably go closer to 4, which is what I'm going to talk about now, As Old as Time. I love this book. This book took me a while to read, which is a good thing. I don't want a quick twisted tale. The twisted tales are super cool, by the way. So it's like the story, but one thing is different, and how would that one thing change the entire, like, world? Now, I think with this one, it's more than just one thing, but... So the concept for this twisted tale is, what if Belle's mother cursed the Beast? So what if Belle's mother was the famous enchantress? This story, like, I've read other twisted tales. I think the first one I read was the Frozen one, and it felt like I was reading so much of the Frozen script, like the original Frozen script, just different people and concepts. And I was kind of like dreading if this was going to be the same way. It's not. This one is so much better because the story is just so drastically different. So, it still starts the same. There's an enchantress, curses a prince, curses an 11-year-old prince. I think we all wondered this for years. Did the enchantress curse a child? According to this, yes, she did. Which, they go into that. They do. And they go into, like, the why and the importance of that. Well, like, again, there's not really a good way to justify cursing an 11-year-old, but the idea is there's magic in this world. Like, there was always magic in the world. And Belle's mother is one of the most powerful magical people. But they're living in a kingdom that is afraid of them. Thinks that they're responsible for the bad things in the world. Thinks that they're unholy, impure, in some cases, demonic. And then, she goes missing right after she curses the prince. And that's kind of the idea of they have no idea what happened to her. Her father knows that something's always been missing, that like he could never really remember anything about her. She made the world forget about magic. She made the entire world forget about magic because what's happening to her people, they're being persecuted and killed and kidnapped and hurt. So she makes the whole world forget about them to try to protect them. But then there's all these ramifications, and it's insane. So going back to the original story, so Maurice, Belle's father, goes off to the fair, like in the original, and gets lost and finds the castle. And obviously, beasts don't like that, locks him in the dungeon. Belle goes after him and takes his place. Here's where the twist is. So, not long after that, we remember the original Disney movie. Belle goes into the West Wing where she's not supposed to go, and she finds the magic rose. Here's your big twist. She touches the rose and destroys it. Uh-oh. I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm gonna spoil a big thing about this book. The Beast does not turn back into a prince in this book. Which I think is like the biggest cliffhanger I've ever heard. I want there to be a sequel to this book. So the idea is she touches the rose and the rose is destroyed. When she touches the rose, she sees all these memories and learns that her mother was the enchantress. She cursed the prince, and we learn that the prince's parents were jerks, and like they denied the enchantress protection. She wanted protection for her people, and they said, no, your people are the problem. And then a plague comes, and then they beg for her help, and she says, I'm not helping you, you didn't help me. And then what she does is she comes back, and she wants to judge the prince after the king and queen have died, because they die of a plague. A plague comes, and she protects everybody else in the palace. Everybody else gets protected, but not the king and queen, because the king and queen are jerks. And they're afraid. They're reacting to their fear. And they react poorly to their fear, but it's their fear. So she comes back after they've died, and before the prince is crowned king, she comes to test his heart to see if he is a loving person, if he can see beyond appearances. And of course, he can't, and so she curses him. And puts an enchantment on the entire castle, and that he has to find love, get love in return, turns all of the servants into household objects, which, by the way, that was always such an interesting idea. Like, where did she get that idea from? And I mean, it kind of goes into that. It really doesn't go into why she turned them into animated objects. Yeah, it didn't go into that much. But there's so much to the story. So, she touches the rose, it's destroyed, the beast, like, goes into despair temporarily, she runs away, he saves her from the wolf. See, that's still the same. And then the rest of the book after that, like, obviously, like, everything's changed now. They're trying to figure out how they can reverse the curse still. So they're doing all this research, trying to learn about her mother, trying to learn about, like, why did she do the curse? And then we learn the mother is still alive. She's been imprisoned for years and years and years by this terrible, terrible person. Hey, you remember that asylum guy? The creepy, creepy asylum guy? Yeah, he's a big deal in this book. So apparently he was best friends with Belle's parents. And apparently he had, like, a teeny bit of magic, but he despised himself for it because he thought he was an unholy being himself. So he was an asylum doctor who came up with all these practices to remove magic. And that's what he's been doing for years and years and years. He abducted Belle's mother, was holding her hostage, trying to remove her magic. It's very dark. Like, this story, not all of them I've heard are this dark. This one is very dark. Because there's an asylum, and he is doing, like, horrible, horrible procedures to these people. Like, and what it pretty much says is either they survive it or they die from it. Because he's trying to, like, go into their brains and pull out their magic and go into, like, their blood and pull out magic. It's a creepy, creepy, creepy thing. Like, it's dark. It is very dark. Gaston is still a character in this. I mean, he still proposes to Belle and there's all that. Gaston is actually part of the, like, he kind of saves the day. Not exactly saves the day, but, like, so Belle and the Beast have to escape the castle and they end up going to the villagers for help. One of them being Gaston. Well, the Beast goes because Belle is actually taken prisoner by this crazy asylum dude too, because he wants to make sure Belle doesn't have any magic. Like, he locks up the whole family. Maurice is there, Belle's there, the mom's there. That's how they're reunited, though. The whole family gets back together. It's actually very touching. But why in an insane asylum? Oh boy. I'm jumping around a lot. Like, this story, see, that's the thing about this story. It jumps around a lot too. It's very hard to keep a coherent plot line because the plot actually, like, it shifts from Maurice to Belle to the Beast to the mother. It goes around a lot. But it's an intense ride. It's really good though. The story is really good. It is dark, but I highly, highly recommend. I think both of them are good. I think the villain series, like, I think you need to read the whole series, and I think it gets better and it builds on itself. Versus this, where it's a standalone story. I wish it had a sequel because it ends with, like, they free everyone in the asylum. The crazy asylum dude, he gets killed. He's dead. He's gone. He's bye-bye. There was really no other way for that to go. I mean, it shouldn't, like, the whole like, there's a whole thing that leads up to it, and then, like, everyone's upset with how and why it happens, but it needed to happen. Like, he's a crazy, creepy dude. Like, if you think back to the original Disney movie, like, do you remember that, like, Gaston and LeFou were sitting with the creepiest? He's creepy. He's so creepy. And he's locking up dozens and dozens of people just because they might have magical affiliations or might have magical backgrounds and doing, oh man, it's really disturbing. And, like, the detailedness of it, like, I had to stop a couple times and be like, not real, it's fake, but it's disturbing. Like, a couple of the details and descriptions are kind of disturbing. You're like, this is still Disney? This is like a PG-13 Disney now. But ultimately, like, it has a bittersweet ending, honestly. Because the Beast doesn't turn back into a prince. They're trying to figure out how to do it because they think they can figure it out. But he does not actually turn back into a prince in the book. I'd almost like to see a second book of this come out just to see, like, does he turn back into a prince? Because, like, the Beast and Belle, like, in their own way end up together. But, like, he's not a prince again. He's not the king yet. But, like, the flowers got, like, can they reverse the curse? Because that's the big thing. They think they have a way, but it doesn't happen. So can they reverse the curse? All right, well, that is all on our double feature Beast Within and As Old as Time. I highly recommend them. If you like Beauty and the Beast, these are really good. If you're not willing to get invested in a whole series, this book is really good. I will say, though, it's very long. It is, it's about 500 pages long, but it's worth it. Like, it's really good. All right, we need to draw for our reading next week. All right, let's see here. All right, I'm gonna try to... All right, well, this is a new one. This is one that's been on my shelf for a while, but I've never read. It is Prophecy of the Sisters by Michelle Zink. It's a series. It's a young adult fantasy series. Cool. I know I have this. I don't really know anything about it, though. I wrote this one down because a few years ago I went to a clearance book sale, and they had a bunch of them, so I grabbed them up and I was like, I'll read it eventually. I think it's been like three years probably it's been sitting on my shelf. I've got so many books to read. But so next week we'll be talking about Prophecy of the Sisters, book 1. I don't know what the book 1 title is. I didn't write it down, but book 1, and we'll see how that one goes because I really don't know anything about it. If I like it, then I'll keep reading it. If not, well, then I'll go on to the next one. So I will see you in the next book club. Bye!